Christopher Bell in the wall!
The pressure of the playoffs was on, and non-playoff drivers were out to play spoiler. We'll break down how it happened next.
Hell yeah, boys! Drink some beer!
Welcome to a new episode of NASCAR Inside the Race, presented by Consumer Cellular. I'm Drew Blickensderfer, crew chief of the 10, joined by Luke Lambert, crew chief of the 77. I think there were a lot of playoff guys that thought, thankfully, a mile and a half, a little less chaotic than what we've had in the first round, but it was anything but that on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of guys came into this race looking to use the speed of their cars and the programs that everybody works on all year to build to come to a mile and a half and just do what your bread and butter of your program is. And, you know, ultimately for a lot of the playoff guys, it wasn't the day they hoped to have, and they ended up coming out of there with losing a lot of points. A couple guys had good days, and then ultimately Ross Chastain comes in as a spoiler. Non-playoff guy comes in, captures that win, and takes away that lock-in playoff move that the guys could have gotten if they won.
Well, Luke, let's take a look at Ross Chastain's day win on Sunday.
Here on this graph, what we have is a plot of position versus lap number. So as you move across the graph on the bottom, this is the race starting with the first lap and ending with a checkered flag. On the other axis, we have track position. So ultimately, you want to move up this graph as the day goes on to get yourself closer to lead. You can see that Ross started here around 20th, and he ended the day in the lead.
Yeah, I think one key point during the race, you see right here under a pit stop, Ross is moving his way through the field, and all of a sudden he has a big drop.
Yeah, let's take a look at where the issue happens. So the key issue here is at the front of the race car. That being said, he's far into the pit box, which means everything that's happening at the front of the race car is crowded here, and that causes a problem here on the right front.
Yeah, one thing you remind your guys, whether your driver slides long, he slides short, you got to move behind the wall. But it doesn't give you much room here to throw the hose out to make sure it's clearanced. And what happens is it looks like the hose gets caught under the right front, as you see there. Jackman has to come back, re-jack the car, let the right front tire changer get the hose out before he goes to the left front, equals a 16-second pit stop. When we're talking about 8.5, 9-second pit stops when you're running inside the top 10 especially, that's about 12 spots Ross loses on that sequence of events. That could be a killer, but luckily he has great restarts.
This is the point where they had came for tires, they were back in the pack, and were able to capitalize on a lot of guys that were on worse tires in front of them.
He was able to get to the outside, get some clean air on his nose, and just, again, the seas parted. He was shot through the middle coming off turn 2. He's collecting cars left and right, and he's doing what he needs to be doing right now. You need to take advantage of your new tires and get in front of a lot of these guys with older tires as soon as possible to keep that distance between you and the guy up front as tight as possible. The super important part of the race where some of these leaders, the 20, the 24, early playoff guys were up front, the one was able to flip it on them and gain that track position and take control of the race.
This is the point of the race where the strategy flipped. They short pitted. You know, they're taking advantage of the opportunity to not need those stage points. And, you know, it's a different scenario than what we would have seen prior to the playoffs. The guys that are in the playoffs are needing to get those valuable points. The guys that are not are able to race for the win.
Yeah, when you're sitting on the pit box like Rudy Fugle of the 24, you think you've got a really good race car. Get as many stage points as I can. If I go back to 15th, I'll probably be able to pass my way up and maybe not win the race, but I'm going to get close enough to the front where at the end of the day, I will have more points than those guys I am racing. And that really took advantage of Phil Surgeon and the one guys to be able to flip that.
Yeah, you can see how the day flipped. Ultimately, they're able to drive back to the back bumper of the one, but they don't have a car strong enough to pull it off.
Yeah, we have this late race restart here where you have the one who's in second spot. The 19 is the leader off pit road. He's on the outside. And another great example of Ross Chastain getting a tremendous restart to gain the lead. The guy he's going to race at the end of the evening, William Byron, lined up right behind him. In this bottom lane, it just goes really well.
Yeah, he has a clean run, is able to get off the bottom. You can see that the 19 car is having to deal with the 48 on his inside, and that ends up putting him in a compromising position, and he's not able to get the run off the corner that he needed to stay outside of the one.
And this sets it up to where the 24 right here will clear him, and it'll be the 1 versus the 24 to the checkered flag.
Looking at this graph here, this is lap time versus race lap number. So moving across the bottom of the screen here, this is the race progressing start to end, ending at the checkered flag. The idea here is you want to have as low of a lap time, meaning the car's going as fast as possible. So the farther you are down means you're running faster lap times. In blue, we've got Ross Chastain, and in yellow, we have William Byron. So the key takeaways here, looking early in the race, you're able to see that Ross's lap times are not as good as the 24. He's got a higher line than the 24, and particularly the shape of the line, it's got more movement around, meaning he's not as consistent with his lap times. Later in the run, when he's able to stretch out and get probably cleaner air relative to the 24, his pace is similar to what the 24 was, but there was a lot more movement here early, and this movement indicates that his car wasn't driving quite as well in dirty air and traffic, what he was fighting, and it wasn't as predictable. But the important thing for the one-car team is that at the end of the race, when they were able to use strategy and work their way forward and get track position, they have a very strong performing race car, very consistent lap times, meaning the car's driving well, it's predictable, and they're operating at a high level in the lead relative to the 24. And because they have the track position, the 24 is just not able to close the gap and get by them.
It's even hard to see the difference in the two cars at the end of the race. The two lines are almost on top of each other, and when you have guys running a second apart on the racetrack, and William can't run any faster than Ross, it's going to have a hard time passing him, especially if the top lane's the dominant lane like it was on Sunday. It's going to be really hard for him to get there. And we have some videos showing he gets within a half a second of him, and it kind of just stalls out right there.
The one car is too good, too dialed in, running the preferred lane, and as soon as they get within 4.5 tenths, they're just not able to get any closer, and the 24 is just not able to get by.
And what happens at tracks like this, if William Byron is another 10 cars further back than Ross, he's getting a little bit of a draft down the straightaway, and he still has some clean air on his nose. Once he gets this close to him, although he is getting the draft and can run faster down the straightaway, he's got less air on his race car to help push it into the racetrack to close that gap up anymore. So it's kind of 10 car lengths you see right there. It ends up being about a half a second difference between the two cars. You kind of stall out right there, especially when they have two graphs like we saw previously where their lap time is on top of each other.
Yeah, two very equally performing cars, the one car having the advantage of track position, and he's able to make it happen.
So we saw how hard it was for the 24 to catch the one there, especially with equal cars and the track position the one had in front of him with the top dominant line. And Chastain finds his way to victory lane for the first time this season. But up next, we're going to look at what happened to another driver looking for his first win of 2024.
Talladega, the biggest, baddest track in NASCAR, welcomes the playoffs. And Hall of Famer Carl Edwards joins us to take you inside all things fast with a twist. It's NASCAR Inside the Playoffs on True TV and Max.
So we know the playoffs bring added pressure to a lot of guys. It affected some of the front runners on Sunday. Let's take a look at how it did it.
Yeah, the first example we're going to look at maybe wouldn't be as much of a playoff pressure situation. It's a pressure to need to win a race. The eight team expects to win a race. They're a strong race team. They haven't got that win yet this year, and they find themselves in a spot right here. Been struggling being loose on exit, and as he tries to get past the 14 car, he gets put in bad air, caught in his wake on exit of the corner in a spot that he was already getting loose, and that ultimately ends up causing problems.
I think an interesting thing for a lot of the fans, if you back it up here a little bit, Luke, is a lot of fans hear about aero tight. And when you're talking about aero tight, you're usually lined up right behind a race car, and that's less air on the front of your race car.
You can see the proximity of the 8 to the 14. So the 14 car is making a wake off the back. It's spreading out. And the 8 is in this position where he's getting a lot of dirty air off the 14. Although it may look like he's in clean racetrack, he does have some clean air, but he doesn't have a full car width of clean air. And that causes a very difficult aero scenario for these race cars. Typically makes them really loose when you're offset to the right side. And he found himself in that position at a position of the racetrack that he was already fighting an oversteering car.
Yeah, right here, a lot of that air from the wake, Kyle breaks through it and air dumps on the nose of that race car. So if he's already free off the corner and you get all of the air dumped on the front of your race car, that even accentuates it. You can see it on the in-car camera as well when we're watching this. The 14 kind of gives him the lane at the top. Kyle's thinking, all right, if I can get to his right rear, I can clear him about right here. He gets out of the wake of the race car of the 14, and his car's getting free. And you see him kind of start to save it and move around. You see him hit right rear, right front, and then as he's trying to save it, he spins out right here. And that's just him getting out of the wake in a weird position and getting something uncomfortable feeling of what he wasn't expecting earlier in the race when he was driving around people.
So let's take a look at another scenario that happened for a playoff driver under pressure. Probably one of the strongest cars of the field for the day, the 20 car, trying to make time here on the top lane. You know, risk versus reward, it's a difficult spot.
A lot of the times when you run against the wall, there's a buffer of air right here in the old car and the Xfinity car and the truck that really keeps the car kind of cushioned, where you get within 6 inches and it kind of buffers it and gets really comfortable to drive around the wall right there. With the next gen car, our tails taper from the rear wheels to the bumper cover, and there's no cushion there. So although the speed is against the wall just like it is in the old car and in the Xfinity car, it's not secure up there. And if you have a loose race car like you see Christopher Bell has right here, you can jump over that cushion like a dirt term. You can jump over that cushion and get in the wall pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's right. We refer to that as wall effect. As you said, it's just not as sensitive in these cars. And so, you know, you can look at the 20 car right here. He starts to get a little bit loose and he's having to chase it all the way up to the wall. There's no aero performance gained as he gets closer to the wall, or at least not enough to make a difference.
And at this point of the race, the 20 car stays out on older tires to try to win a stage. He's been leading the race. Those are 10 points Adam Stevens and Christopher Bell want to put in their back pocket to go off into these playoffs. And he's making sure he gets out front. If he takes the lead off turn 2 for just a couple laps, he's going to probably lead him to the green checker. And just a little hiccup right there really cost him.
Yeah, you know, it's an example of how much pressure is on the playoff guys and the fact that they have to be aggressive, right? You cannot race these races conservative and get the points that you need to transfer on through. So you have to be aggressive. The 20 team's doing their job. They're doing what they've got to do. They're trying to stay in front. They're trying to get all the max points. And ultimately, you know, that aggressiveness puts them in a compromising situation.
Yeah, you have to be on the edge, and just jumped over right there. There's even another example later in the race with Christopher. He kind of does the exact same thing, and very similar to the 8. He's kind of in the bad air zone of the 48. He's getting air dumped on the nose of his race car. We talked about it earlier with a lot of these aero effects of this car when you go around somebody. The air of the 48's kind of coming around it, and he enters the corner on him, and then he gets to the wall, and the 48 gives him that lane. And what happens there is a lot of front downforce. He's getting a ton of downforce on the front of his race car right here, and that's causing the front to stick, the back to become light, and he kind of jumps the cushion again.
Yeah, it's just a balance issue, you know. He knows what his car is going to do in clean air. He's been in that scenario before. As he moves around in different positions and he's trying to get the advantage on the 48, his car swings balance really rapidly, and that's what ends up, you know, ultimately catching him off guard and getting him in the fence.
Fortunately for Christopher Bell and the 20 car, they didn't take a huge hit in the standings. You're going to want every single point when you head to Talladega. So why don't we come back next and look at those standings?
Hey race fans, Corey LaJoy here. Join Ryan Flores and myself for Stacking Pennies each week. I'll break down my race and explain what happened right out of my windshield.
Plus, we award the Dogs of the Week for the best pit crews and go in-depth on all the money stops, pit road mistakes, and penalties.
And we've got a ton of guests. We have SVG stopping by. We had Ricky Stenhouse after he punched Kyle Busch in the face. We've had Bubba. We've had all sorts of guys in here in the Nonsense Garage, so you do not want to miss it. Check us out on Sirius XM Channel 90, YouTube, or wherever you find your podcast. Each and every week, Stacking Pennies. That's what's up.
I'm Ryan Flores. Join Kim Kuhn and myself each and every week right here at Around the Track. Whether you are going to the racetrack or watching from home, we get you ready for all things national and regional level.
And we'll tell you who and what to watch for each week. Plus, we get you ready for the weekend at the racetrack, and Erica will help you place your bets to win some easy money.
Be sure to check out Around the Track every Wednesday on NASCAR's YouTube channel.
Well, Luke, another playoff race in the books and another standings where we see quite a bit of movement.
Yeah, here we've got the playoff standings prior to Kansas and the playoff standings after Kansas. Looking at the cutoff line here, leading into the Kansas race, you know, you can see these 4 guys on the outside looking in, the 2, the 99, the 48, the 14. All cars are within 10 points of the cut line. if you can see what happens here, this is going to be the movement that happened in Kansas. It was a tough day for all the guys here that are highlighted in red, and the guys that are highlighted in green were able to make positive movement throughout the day. So, the 5 car here, he lost 21 points. The 45 lost 24 points. The 2 car lost 25 points as well. So there was a lot of movement. Difficult days for these last 4 guys here.
I've said it for about 4 weeks in a row. Alex Bowman, my goodness, what a playoff run that team has had. They've been consistent. They've been running up front. I think we were all wondering how quickly the 48 might get knocked out of the playoffs. He's making a run towards the front of the standings here, even in the round of 12.
Yeah, it's been super impressive. They have hit championship form, from the moment the playoffs started, and they've been one of the consistently the top performers moving through this first round and starting this round off. Conversely, I think one of the biggest surprises for me has been the 45 team.
Yeah.
Watching them in the later part of the regular season, I expected them to be a favorite for the championship. The way they've started the playoffs out, they're going to have to get back on track to get back to where they were before the playoffs started so that they can keep moving. Let's take a look at the last 12 races for Tyler Reddick and the 45 team.
This is leading up into the playoffs.
The playoffs start here at Atlanta. It is the tale of 2 stories.
Yeah, you definitely see a difference. This 45 car, remember, won the regular season championship. And a lot of that is because of, look at this performance leading up into the playoffs. The guy is up front running in the top 3 every single week leading into it.
Yeah, remarkable championship form, top 5, top 6 every week. Then we move in here to Daytona. So Daytona, we don't think too much about Daytona as far as rating a team's program. It's a little bit of a luck of the draw. Not a great day, not super alarming. Now we go to Darlington, okay? You put yourself in the 45 team shoes. They're there trying to close out the regular season championship. My thought is they're racing hard, but trying to race conservative to make sure they do what they have to do to get the regular season championship. They're ultimately able to do that. But now we move to Atlanta, another super speedway. They have a great run, so solid day. But again, not sure you want to grade your program off how you perform at Atlanta. The real important tracks for how the team should perform really well are leading after that. Watkins Glen, Bristol, and Kansas, 3 racetracks that I would expect the 45 team to be back in that form that we were seeing late in the regular season, and they just have not had the results that they need to get.
Yeah, one thing that I think is really interesting about when you look at this is you start looking at Nashville, you start looking at Michigan, fairly smooth racetracks, pretty fast, especially Michigan, should compare to Kansas.
Yeah, you would expect those to be good indicators.
Exactly. 3rd at Nashville, 1st at Michigan, 25th at Kansas. The other ones I look right here at, Chicago, road course, runs 2nd, goes to Watkins Glen, 27th. It's phenomenal to me to see 12 weeks ago, Tyler Reddick couldn't finish outside the top 6, and now he's struggling to finish inside the top 10 these last few weeks.
Yeah, it's got to be alarming for the team, knowing where they were later in the regular season. The team is strong. The speed's still there. They've proven they can win races. They just have to do what they need to do to put themselves back into the form that they were earlier and start executing and closing out to get the results that they need.
Well, Luke, we'll see if the 45 can get back on track. At a racetrack he won in the spring, I'm sure they have a little confidence going in this week to score some points. We'll be there at Talladega as well. Hopefully you can join us. It's the Cup Series, Sunday, 2 p.m. Eastern Time on NBC.